They didn't even look me in the eye. Meredith, after reviewing the company's strategic priorities, we're eliminating your role, Cynthia Blake said, folding her hands over a manila folder. She sat across the table in a glass-walled conference room, her voice smooth but hollow. Beside her was Brian from HR, nodding with the solemnity of a man trained to deliver rehearsed sympathy. I had given Sentinel Data Systems 15 years. I had architected the software that built their reputation. And this was how it ended. "We appreciate your contributions," Brian added, sliding the folder toward me. "You'll receive severance, 2 weeks for every year, continued health coverage through the quarter, and of course, outplacement services." Outplacement, a soft word for displacement. I nodded and took the folder without looking at it. "I understand," I said calmly. Both of them visibly relaxed. They expected a breakdown. A 56-year-old woman ousted from the tech world? Surely she'd cry or argue. They didn't know me at all. What they didn't realize was that I'd known this day was coming. I saw the signs. The sudden drop in meeting invites. The way my name disappeared from internal documentation. The email thread, forwarded to me by mistake, detailing the company's intention to consolidate power and restructure legacy leadership. I was the legacy, and they thought they could quietly erase me. But what no one knew was that I had been preparing. Quietly. Deliberately. "You'll need to return your keycard, company laptop, and phone by Friday," Cynthia continued. "Of course," I said. My voice didn't waver, but something inside me tightened. Not from fear, but from clarity. I walked back through the sleek hallways, past the executive boardroom, where CEO Ethan Clark stood before a presentation titled Q2 Growth Forecast. He didn't glance my way. I didn't expect him to. In my office, I closed the door and pulled out my personal phone. "It's done," I texted. "They let me go." The reply came instantly. "Perfect. Contracts are ready. Dinner tonight to finalize." I looked at the framed photo on my desk. My team, 6 engineers I had recruited, trained, and defended. They were young, brilliant, loyal. They didn't know yet, but everything was about to change. For them, and for me. I started packing up my personal items slowly. A coffee mug that read, "Code like a girl." A photo from the product launch in 2015. A small crystal award with my name engraved beneath the words Innovator of the Year. They thought they were getting rid of a burden. What they were actually doing was unleashing a storm. How many times have we stayed silent when dismissed, erased, or overlooked, just to keep the peace? But what if losing something familiar is the very thing that sets us free? That evening, I arrived at the Copper Lantern, a quiet, high-end restaurant tucked away from Sentinel's downtown offices. The host guided me to a private corner booth where Lucas Grant, CEO of Orion Dynamics, was already waiting. "They actually did it," he said, standing to shake my hand. "Unbelievable." "Not really," I replied, sliding into the booth. "They underestimated me the same way they always have." Lucas offered a tight smile. He'd spent 2 decades in the same industry trenches I had, and he knew exactly how often women like me, especially over 50, were pushed aside when we became inconvenient. We ordered dinner, but business came first. He reached into his briefcase and placed a sleek navy folder between us. "Everything's ready. Orion gets exclusive rights to your new patent. You join as Chief Innovation Officer, and your team, if they say yes, gets upgraded titles and a 30% salary increase across the board." I flipped through the documents, though I already knew them by heart. Over the past 2 months, I had met Lucas in secret to negotiate this move. The trigger? A discovery I made after that accidental email landed in my inbox. When I checked Sentinel's internal legal filings, I realized something shocking. They had never submitted the patent for the algorithm I developed, the very technology that powered their flagship product, PulseFrame. When I asked, they claimed it was an oversight, that they'd take care of it, but something in their tone had made the hair on my neck stand up. So I started digging. I found a confidential strategy memo that detailed plans to claim the algorithm as a company-developed product, without crediting me as the inventor. Worse, they were stalling the patent process until they could formally sever my employment. But they hadn't accounted for one thing. I had continued refining that algorithm in my off hours, on my personal laptop. The enhancements I developed significantly boosted data processing speeds by over 40%. And legally, they belonged to me. I documented everything: timestamps, logs, diagrams. I even filed the independent patent using an IP attorney Lucas recommended. 3 weeks ago, it was approved. Now, I was no longer a ghost behind the curtain. I was the name on the license, the owner of the technology that 43% of the industry now depended on. I want protections for my team in writing, I told Lucas, scanning the folder. Already in there, he said, and we'll announce your hire Monday morning, alongside our acquisition of the patent. And Sentinel? They'll find out with the rest of the world. I signed the contract with a steady hand. That night, I sat in my apartment and stared out over the city skyline. I had spent so many years in boardrooms, watching younger men present my ideas as their own, collecting applause while I sat quietly in the background. I had endured being called mentor material instead of leadership potential, endured seeing less experienced coworkers leapfrog over me with the support of men like Ethan Clark. Now, I had done something none of them had seen coming. I wasn't just walking away. I was walking into something bigger. Friday morning, I stood in my office for the last time, the sunlight slanting across my desk like it always had. The space looked smaller now, stripped of everything personal. Just a few cardboard boxes remained, filled with photos, awards, and books no one ever borrowed, but always commented on. I moved slowly, deliberately, not out of sadness, but precision. Cynthia from operations hadn't expected me to leave, so, quietly, the whole office, it seemed, had braced for a scene. But I had something far more effective than rage. I had documentation. For the past 2 days, I'd prepared detailed transition reports. Every project, every line of code, every password. I knew that in a matter of days, panic would ripple through Sentinel data systems, and someone would accuse me of sabotaging the handover. But there would be no missing files, no gaps, just clean exits and timelines that proved, beyond doubt, I had acted in complete good faith. It was the kind of professionalism they'd never appreciate, until it was too late. At 11:45 a.m., Brian from HR called me in for my exit interview. He read from a printed checklist, barely making eye contact. I answered each question clearly, repeating back key phrases. Nothing was removed. All documentation is in the shared drive. No proprietary material was taken. Then he slid the NDA across the table. You understand that any intellectual property developed during your employment is the property of Sentinel Data Systems. I do, I said, pausing just long enough. Anything created during working hours, using company resources, is theirs. He nodded, not realizing what I'd just clarified. I signed the final page, stood, and shook his hand. It was done. Back at my desk, I carefully placed the last item in my box, a small crystal plaque with the words 2017 Innovator of the Year. It was the first and last award they ever gave me. As I turned to leave, someone appeared at the door. Cynthia, I just wanted to make sure everything's wrapped up, she said, her tone light, eyes scanning the room like she expected to find something incriminating. All clear, I said. She leaned against the doorframe with forced casualness. I hope you know this wasn't personal. The company's moving in a more agile direction, younger, more flexible talent. I met her gaze without flinching. I understand. Business is business. That stopped her for a beat. There was something in my tone she hadn't expected. A calmness too complete to be natural. Do you have plans? She asked, trying to soften the awkwardness. I start Monday, I replied, lifting the box into my arms. Already? Her eyebrows lifted. That was fast. Leadership position, I said with a smile. A better fit, actually. Cynthia didn't respond, just nodded and stepped aside. I walked the familiar hallway for the last time, passing framed posters of products I had helped design, campaigns built on software I had developed in midnight coding sessions while others went home. No one stopped me. A few glanced up from their desks, unsure what to say. Others pretended not to see. I didn't need their sympathy. I needed this clean break. At the front desk, I turned in my keycard. The receptionist wished me luck in a voice that suggested she wasn't sure whether she should. Outside, the air was cool. I stood for a moment on the steps of the building, looking up at the glass tower where I had spent 15 years building something that would soon collapse without me. They didn't know it yet, but by Monday morning, Sentinel would be facing a crisis unlike any they had planned for. Their flagship product, PulseFrame, was about to lose its core engine, my algorithm, and they had no legal claim to the new, optimized version. I had made sure of that. My phone buzzed in my coat pocket. Lucas, Orion Dynamics. Press release is scheduled, goes live 7 a.m. sharp. I smiled, tightening my grip on the box. What I felt wasn't revenge. Not really. It was balance being restored. Recognition finally catching up to contribution. On Monday, the headlines would break. Sentinel's biggest competitor had hired the creator of the technology they relied on, who now held the only legal license to the new version. Within hours, Sentinel's leadership would realize that their smooth transition was anything but. But today wasn't about that. Today was about walking out with my name, my dignity, and my future intact. And for the first time in years, I felt free. How many of us leave places where we gave our all, only to be treated like we never mattered? And when that happens, do we walk away defeated? Or do we walk away ready to begin again, stronger? Monday arrived with a stillness that didn't last long. At exactly 7 a.m., Orion Dynamics issued a press release that would send shockwaves across the tech industry. Orion Dynamics acquires exclusive rights to next-gen data processing technology. Dr. Meredith Lane appointed Chief Innovation Officer. The statement was crisp, but every word landed like a hammer. It credited me as the sole inventor of the breakthrough algorithm, outlined its performance advantages, and confirmed that Orion now held the exclusive rights to integrate it across all future platforms. But the most devastating line came near the end. All companies currently utilizing older versions of this technology must now license updated usage through Orion Dynamics. Sentinel Data Systems was not named, but they didn't need to be. By 8 a.m., my phone was vibrating nonstop. Notifications, emails, industry pings. Tech blogs were already dissecting the announcement. Investors were reacting. Developers were speculating. At 9:15 a.m., I received a text from Ryan, my former lead engineer at Sentinel. Complete chaos here. You detonated a bomb. I smiled. Check your personal email, I replied. Each of my 6 former team members had received private offers from Orion, better pay, flexible roles, full creative autonomy, and every one of them accepted. Meanwhile, across the city at Sentinel's Glass and Steel headquarters, the mood was far less celebratory. According to Ryan's updates, CEO Ethan Clark had stormed into the Monday executive meeting to find the company's general counsel and CFO already waiting, grim-faced, holding printouts of the Orion press release. What should have been a routine Q1 forecast meeting morphed into a war room session. By 9:30, board members were dialing in. Legal teams were scrambling. Someone had reportedly wheeled in servers from the R&D floor, demanding a full forensic review of everything tied to my name. I could picture it clearly. Ethan pacing the room, demanding to know who had dropped the ball on patent filings. His face turning red when told there was no legal claim to the new version. The uncomfortable silence when he asked how long it would take to replicate the improvements. The answer, years, if ever. At 10:45 a.m., Ethan finally reached out. Subject: URGENT, Please call me. Kira, there appears to be a serious misunderstanding regarding your patent. Please call me as soon as possible so we can resolve this constructively. I forwarded the email to Orion's legal team without replying. By noon, Sentinel's stock had dropped 7%. Orion's had climbed 11%. That afternoon, Lucas stopped by my office. You good? He asked. I looked up from my new desk, floor-to-ceiling windows behind me, the city below. Better than I've been in years, I said truthfully. We've had inquiries from two of Sentinel's biggest clients, he said. They're worried. They want to know if your new algorithm will integrate with their systems. It will, I replied, and will support them properly. They'll never have to chase me for documentation or clarity. Lucas grinned. You're an asset this company didn't know it needed until now. What he didn't say, but I knew, was that Ethan Clark had just learned that same lesson the hard way. By mid-afternoon, Ryan texted again. All hands meeting just ended. Ethan's trying to act calm, but he's rattled. Someone asked if the company had properly secured the patent. Marjorie looked like she was going to faint. Ethan shut down Q&A immediately I could imagine it. The fear, the exposed cracks. For years, they had operated on the illusion that people like me, quiet, committed, older, were disposable. What they failed to grasp was that we also tend to be meticulous, and we remember everything. At 3 p.m., Orion's legal team received a formal inquiry from Sentinel's attorneys requesting a meeting to clarify patent rights and explore resolution pathways. That was their way of saying, please don't destroy us. We responded with grace and iron. Yes, we're open to discussing licensing agreements. Here are our terms: 3 times the standard market rate, and public acknowledgement of Dr. Lane as the sole inventor. I asked Lucas, you think they'll choke on the acknowledgement more than the cost? Ethan? Absolutely. His ego won't survive it. But it's non-negotiable. Then they'll rebuild, I said. And every month they spend trying to replicate what they threw away is another month we lead the industry. He raised his coffee. To foresight. And to never being underestimated again. By Wednesday morning, the fallout had gone from internal panic to full-blown public spectacle. Sentinel's stock had now dropped a staggering 16% since Monday. Industry analysts were calling it the algorithm crisis, and headline after headline echoed the same concern. Can Sentinel survive without its core technology? At Orion, things looked vastly different. I sat in a glass-walled strategy room with Lucas and our legal counsel, reviewing inquiries from companies eager to distance themselves from Sentinel's instability. We'd already received licensing interest from Dataflow Systems, Capital Core, and 2 international financial platforms that had relied heavily on Sentinel's PulseFrame software, the very platform built on my original algorithm. The day before, Ryan had sent another update from the inside. Developers are jumping ship, LinkedIn profiles getting updated. Our whole former team posted a joint resignation letter, went viral internally. The ripple effect of my departure had become a wave. And still, Ethan hadn't faced the reality. He was clinging to the idea that Sentinel could rebuild, reinvent, rebrand. But he didn't understand the technology. He never had. At 2 p.m. Wednesday, Sentinel's legal team requested a formal video meeting. I wasn't required to attend. Orion's legal representatives were handling it, but I watched the recording afterward. Ethan sat stiffly at the end of a long boardroom table, trying to project control while his lawyers attempted to argue that elements of the improved algorithm may have been inspired by work done while employed at Sentinel. Our team calmly laid out the facts. Patent filed under my name. Documented logs of development, all off hours. Equipment used was personal and verifiable. Legal precedent in our favor. They had no claim, not even a shaky one. That evening, I received a phone call I didn't expect. Dr. Lane? The voice was formal but subdued. This is Richard Donovan. I've just been appointed interim CEO of Sentinel Data Systems. For a moment, I said nothing. The silence itself was a reckoning. I'm calling, he continued, to formally request a meeting to discuss licensing your algorithm and rectifying past oversights. We are prepared to acknowledge your contribution and enter negotiations under fair terms. I didn't reply right away, not out of pettiness, but because I wanted the gravity of what he'd just said to settle. Recognition, at last. We'll schedule a time, I said. My team will coordinate with Orion Legal. When I hung up, I allowed myself one deep breath. Not triumph, not revenge, just closure. That Friday, I led Orion's quarterly innovation review with my full team, including Ryan, Taylor, Priya, and the others who had left Sentinel with me. Their presence in the room was a testament to something far greater than strategy. It was about rebuilding the right way, with loyalty, vision, and respect. During the briefing, Lucas leaned over and whispered, "Our valuation just surpassed Sentinel's, for the first time in company history." I paused for a beat, let it land. I remembered Ethan's condescending smile during our last performance review. "You're incredibly valuable, Meredith," he had said. "But tech is changing fast. You may want to start mentoring the younger staff. Let them carry the torch." Turns out, I never needed to pass the torch. I just needed to light a better fire. Later that evening, while reviewing licensing updates from our partners, my assistant brought in an envelope. Inside was a formal invitation to speak at the upcoming Women in Technology Leadership Summit. Topic: Owning Your Intellectual Value, How Documentation Changed an Industry. Lucas walked in just as I was reading it. He saw the invite and chuckled. "You've become something of an icon, you know." "I didn't set out to be," I replied. "I just wanted credit for what I built." "And now the entire industry's watching you." I set the envelope aside and returned to my work. Recognition wasn't about standing in the spotlight. It was about ensuring that women like me, those who worked late into the night, who were too often labeled supportive instead of visionary, finally had a blueprint for what to do when the world tried to forget them. And now? Now, they couldn't ignore me. 1 year to the day after I was quietly dismissed from Sentinel Data Systems, I sat in my corner office at Orion Dynamics, sunlight pouring through the window, a fresh pot of coffee brewing nearby, and the quarterly innovation report spread out in front of me. 3 new products, 4 major corporate clients switched over from Sentinel, a 47% market share increase, a 27% rise in Orion's valuation. I had stopped measuring success in titles and bonuses a long time ago. Now I measured it in impact. And this was impact. A soft knock at the door. Lucas stepped in, holding a bottle of champagne and 2 crystal glasses. "Happy anniversary," he said, smiling like a man who rarely slowed down, but knew when a moment needed to be marked. "The board asked me to tell you personally," he continued, setting the bottle down. "Orion has officially surpassed Sentinel in market valuation. First time in company history." I sat back in my chair. I should have felt triumphant, but what I felt was simpler. Quiet satisfaction. "That's what happens," I said, "when you invest in people instead of replacing them." Lucas poured the champagne. We toasted, not just to victory, but to vindication. My phone buzzed with a notification. Sentinel had just released a public statement finalizing their licensing agreement with Orion. The release acknowledged me by name as the sole inventor of the algorithm that powered their now fragile flagship software. A year ago, that acknowledgement was unthinkable. Now it was printed in black and white, every word a record of what they had tried to erase. That afternoon, I stepped onto the stage at the Women in Technology Leadership Summit. The ballroom was packed. Executives, engineers, students, journalists. The same industry that had once quietly watched me be pushed out was now eager to hear what I had to say. The moderator's voice echoed across the room. "Please welcome our keynote speaker, Dr. Meredith Lane, Chief Innovation Officer at Orion Dynamics, and the mind behind the algorithm that revolutionized enterprise data processing." I walked to the podium and looked out across the crowd. "I spent most of my career in the background," I began, And if I'm honest, I was good at it. I mentored, I supported, I delivered results. But I rarely insisted on being seen. A few heads nodded. Women, mostly. I continued. Until the day someone tried to erase what I had built. That's when I realized silence protects no one. Not even ourselves. I spoke not just about algorithms and patents, but about the cost of being overlooked and the power of documenting your worth. I urged every person in the room, especially the older women, to stop waiting for recognition and start building their legacy on their own terms. After the session, a young engineer approached me. She couldn't have been more than 28. Her voice trembled slightly. "Your story. It changed how I think about my work," she said. "I've started keeping logs, archiving everything I do outside company time. I just wanted you to know. Because of you, I feel safer." I smiled and touched her arm gently. "That's how change happens," I said. "One line of code, one decision, one voice at a time." Later that evening, alone in my office, I received one last unexpected message. From Richard Donovan. Subject: Thank you, Dr. Lane. I wanted to extend my personal gratitude, not just for working with us on a resolution, but for the integrity with which you've handled this entire chapter. Sentinel has implemented sweeping changes to how we handle innovation attribution. We used your program at Orion as our model. Sometimes the best lessons come from mistakes we're forced to confront. I hope, in time, we can rebuild trust, not for partnership, but for legacy. I read the message twice, then closed my laptop. It was never about revenge, not for me. It was about being seen, being credited, being able to say without apology, "I built this," and now the world knows it. As the last light faded from the skyline, I raised one final toast. Not to Sentinel, not even to Orion, but to every woman who's ever been told her time has passed, only to prove her prime was just beginning. Dr. Meredith Lane's journey reminds us that dignity and recognition are not tied to age, titles, or corporate approval. They're rooted in knowing your worth and protecting what you've built. For older adults who've spent decades giving their best, only to be overlooked, downsized, or replaced, her story is a powerful testament. It's never too late to reclaim ownership of your contributions. Too often, society writes off experience in favor of speed, flash, and youth. But true innovation doesn't expire. It deepens. Meredith's careful documentation, strategic planning, and quiet resolve show that wisdom isn't just valuable. It's powerful when combined with courage and timing. This story teaches us to prepare, not retreat. To stand up, not step aside. Whether in careers, family dynamics, or creative work, the lesson is clear. Protect your legacy. Put your name on what you build. Because recognition isn't about ego, it's about truth. And sometimes, the most transformative chapters in our lives don't come in our 30s. They begin in our 50s and beyond.